Hey folks, so this week I'm just going to go over kind of film set kind of terminology, stuff that you might hear, stuff that you might pick up when it actually comes to use making your projects. Just as a wee kind of recap on things, I know we've spoke a lot about the camera in the last couple of weeks, and we're going to get back to that next week when we go out and actually start taking photos and showing you how things should be working. The weather hasn't been that great in my area, so I've not been able to do that for you this week, but instead we're going to do this. I'm also going to give you a wee thing on how to keep track of your ideas, which I'm going to start with now. So basically any filmmaking process, any kind of creative process, you need to it needs to start from somewhere. It doesn't just start by picking up the camera and going to make whatever. There's a plan that needs to be set in place, and the plan comes from an idea. Most of the time at this level it will be one of your own ideas or someone that you know. You'll be working as a kind of tight wee unit. So I just come up just as a thing. There's a bunch of different ways that you can keep track of your own ideas. And it is all about being creative and maybe thinking outside the box, even if it's just bullet pointing stuff, just as wee reminders to ideas that have maybe cropped into your heads, maybe ideas from books that you've read or other films that you've watched that have spurred on kind of things. It's good to kind of keep wee notes and a wee kind of back catalogue or some bullet points or one or two word kind of sentences, a wee short paragraph, whatever, just as references back to when it comes to you maybe wanting to pursue them, to write them. All good projects start from a good idea. If the idea can be reworked like 100 times. It doesn't need to be solid straight out the gate, but the minute that it gets a bit of traction and somebody else becomes invested in it, then you've kind of got a project on your go. Some people have other ways of doing this. I have a way that I like doing is sometimes I'll draw wee sketches of just some of the imagery that surrounds the idea. So just kind of like a wee quick wrap up of a couple of things, just to remind myself of what I was thinking during the process in case it kind of gets pushed to the back. That will happen a lot. Once you kind of start this process, you will realise that you're generally thinking a lot more about ideas, and some of them will jump out to you instantly and you'll maybe go, right, I'm going to go and work on that then out, and some of them won't and they could sit for a while, but it may be the case you go back to it one day and you're like, oh, I could do something really interesting with that. It's always good to, when you come up with an idea, try and put a face to it. So if you can think of a character and like basically instantly for your idea, then you know you're pretty much on track to just go, right, I need to write this, so it's in motion to do. These are kind of the most important things as your narrative and your character, obviously. To make kind of at this level as well, you're not restricted by any companies or anything like that, so you pretty much have free reign to tell whatever story it is that you really want to tell. And like I said, even going back to the camera, like you can't make a story. We can't touch a camera before you've got a story. Do you know what I mean? Like the minute someone else can see that story unfold, the minute your cameraman or your cinematographer I should say, or your production designer or your producer or whatever gets wind of that story and sees the vision in it, then that's you got traction. So that's how you kind of know that it's a decent idea to maybe pursue. Again, keeping track of your ideas is something very important as well, because it might be a while down the line someone goes, oh, I have an idea for this, and then you could maybe go, oh well, a few years ago I wrote something like that similar down, or had a similar idea, refresh yourself on it, and then that's maybe you got like a collaboration between the two of you, and you can work on a project and learn from each other and expand your kind of process. When it comes to being creative, like, it's not something that you don't need to force it. Like, things will just like appear to you sometimes, and you'll just go, oh, that's an interesting dynamic, or that's an interesting story. Like, you'll pick up wee things from about the world, and just through whatever kind of media you intake, whether that be like games or books, films, TV, art, just poetry, stuff like that. Like, just kinda always be in the lookout for kinda different things. The best way that I've found when it comes to, in terms of character, so you always go for your character's wants and their needs. So once you get your story idea, so for instance, right, say, let me think of one that we can do. Right, so say we have two characters. One of them's a son, say about 20-year-old. One of them's a father who's in his 50s. They've not spoke. The father's got in contact with the son, and the son is on his way to meet him, and he's now standing outside the cafe that he's meant to meet him in, and he can see his dad in the window, and his dad doesn't know that it's him. So instantly you're thinking, right, what does the son want and what does he need? So that's what you're always looking for in a character, is their wants and their needs. You need to write that stuff down. So, like, obviously you write your character biography, so you give us what they look like, what job do they do, what height are they, what hobbies do they do. I usually use 3 characteristics. So the funny, are they outgoing, are they loud, are they arrogant? All of that stuff factors into the outcome of that story, because at that point you take elements of yourself and put them in these characters, but you should remove yourself from the character, and essentially they should be writing themselves. That's a kind of way that it works, as characters tend to write themselves, especially with their good ones. So if you think back to the son, like, why is he there? Like, what does he want? Well, does he want to reconcile with his dad, or does he want to tell his dad what he really thinks of him? What does he need? Does he need a father figure in his life, or does he need to realise that he doesn't need him? Kind of things like that. Wants and needs are always the 2 big things that you should be considering when it comes to writing characters, which are obviously the integral part of stories. But yeah, these are just things to kind of think about when it comes to actually story development. You know, some people draw wee sketches of the characters, some people don't. They just write a wee page biography on who they are. They're always good to keep as well, your character biographies, and your kind of catalogue of people that are going to appear in your story, because then you can add things and remove things and really hone in on who it is you're trying to write. But yeah, that's just stuff to consider. And I'm just going to talk a wee bit about set etiquette. So there's a lot of things obviously going on film sets when it comes to filming, and a lot of things can hinder the project on set, and stuff like actors maybe messing lines up, or lighting not being quite right, cameras failing, shots not being good enough. So it's just the kind of average things. Like, it's a trial and error at this point as well, because it's always about you just trying to hone your own kind of style. So the big kind of misconception is the beginning of a take. The whole kind of 3, 2, 1 action kind of deal isn't really what you would call etiquette. So filmmaking etiquette anyway, so you would maybe strip it back. So the way that you would do it is, if you were directing something, so say you'd write it, most of the level, people that write at this kind of level tend to go on and direct their projects and get their friends and people that they're comfortable working with in to do the other roles. obviously you can't make a film just by purely being a director. You need a good cinematographer, a good sound designer, a good editor, all that kind of stuff all backs up into the project. So what you should look out for is, when you start your take, what you want to do as director is call for silence on set. Make sure you're loud, everybody hears you. You get speed, which is your sound. So you get your sound man to start recording sound. Ask for sound. You should reply speed, right? That means that you know that that sound's rolling. Camera, rolling. 3, 2, 1. Roll camera. Let the camera roll for about maybe 3 seconds. Complete silence. Then you call action. You call action, let the camera roll, everybody quiets, everybody stops, everybody's focused, actors are in place, camera rolls. The reason why you leave that kind of 3-4 seconds is for editing time, so you can cut away that 4 seconds and just launch it straight into that next scene if you want to do that, and it makes it the edit smoother for your editor. So you let that kind of wee period of time go by, and then action, call action, everything explodes into life, and there's your film going. There's a rule for cinematographers, which is an important rule. It's maybe not so much important now in terms of creative choices, but there is the 180 rule, which is you draw a line, so a straight line from, so if you were filming, say if you were filming me, right, and I'm sitting here like this, the line, the 180 line is in front of me, right? So that means that you can film anything on this side, right? But you can't go past that line. So you can't start filming from behind me, so you need to stay in front of me. It's not so much a spoken rule. It is like it is kind of a spoken rule of filmmaking, but it's not so much an adherence anymore. Obviously filmmaking's kind of progressed into more creative and kind of different points of thinking. With a lot more camera techniques, so the 180 rule maybe isn't as fireproof as what it once was, but it's still something to consider. On set. Again, for cinematographers as well, a shot list is probably the second most important thing when it comes to the script for a film. So your shot list is, you go through the full script as a cinematographer, often with your director, maybe not if he trusts you well enough, if he believes in your creative process. You go through the full script and you break down every piece of action and dialogue into how you want to shoot it. So say, for instance, right, we'll go back to the story of the boy and his dad. So say the script starts, a man stands in the street looking into a coffee shop window where he sees an elderly gentleman sitting himself. The man stands across the street under the lights of a street lamp wearing a black hoodie. So then you would go to the filming process of that would be, right, as a cinematographer you're thinking, right, okay, so I want to start this single camera shot on the man standing under the streetlight in the darkness, and then a shot of coffee shop window, gentleman sitting inside the coffee shop, close up of the man sitting himself, an insert shot of the coffee. An insert shot is kind of when it cuts away from things that maybe aren't important to the story, but they're just kind of nice wee touches and details to have. So a wee insert shot of the coffee, which would just be you looking at, just the camera looking at the coffee cup, and then maybe a panning shot of the man walking across the street, and the coffee panning shot would be this. So you go through that script as a cinematographer and you break every single piece of action, dialogue, whatever, down into how you want it to look and how you want it to come out when it comes to filming it. But yeah, it's just, these are, a shot list is probably one of the most integral things that you're going to ever make as a cinematographer, because it's going to let you kind of, it's going to be like a kind of checklist where you can constantly refer back to it to go through it, so that you know that you're on track. And don't be worried if your director wants to try something or deter from the shot list a bit, because they are there as a, sometimes you'll come up with things on the cusp of just wanting to kind of film and shoot and maybe try things on the day, and that's all good. Like, don't ever be scared to do stuff like that either. Like, these are just kind of things and stuff that you might kind of come up with. After the next video on the camera, we're going to go back and look at the camera lenses and what they actually do. I'm going to go in and break down a shot list for you, and show you kind of a better in-depth kind of look at one of them and what they're kind of there for. But yeah, this was just kind of a video just to kind of always kind of be on your toes for creative practices, just in terms of when it comes to actually crafting your story. And don't be afraid to put yourself into these characters. Don't be afraid to put a bit of yourself into them, because it's makes them more relatable for the viewer, you know. Like, obviously everybody goes through things in their life, and sometimes it's nice to use these characters as a bit of escape, as a bit of a storytelling method. So yeah, it's just things to consider, guys. Anyway, thank you very much.